Moving on to the third topic, food security. In the field of food security, CPAG observes, this is according to our research and published in note, I commend to everybody here the policy documents that are on our website. We've laid out, I think it's 11 policy statements with in-depth research, and out of that research we've distilled some recommendations, and from those recommendations these sort of central questions emerge. So in the field of food security, we observe that 1 in 7 children, 13 to 17%, experience food insecurity. Food security, in contrast, means the state guarantees that those children have access to sufficient food that meets their dietary needs for a healthy and active life. CPAG advocates for the following position. For the first 1,000 days of a child's life, the state guarantees food security for the pregnant mother, the child, and immediate whanau. Beginning with you, Haktai. Again, I put the question, if the answer is yes, what are the specific steps your party would implement to carry out this policy and when? If the answer is no, what are the brief but precise reasons for rejecting the policy?
So Te Pāti Māori's answer is yes. And how we do that, we remove GST from kai. All whanau should have the dignity to put kai on the table. All whanau should have the dignity to choose what kai they put on the table. It's not for us to tell you what you can put on your table, but we will remove GST from all kai for all families. And if we think about the 2.1 million whanau that are earning that earn $30,000 or less, the savings that will have for them, and it's the step in a pathway forward to reducing or eliminating child poverty.
Precise and crisp.
Good. So the Opportunities Party, we recognise that the biggest impact on cost of living is housing, and so we think land value tax will try and stabilise the housing market so people have more money left, because the real problem is that people's rents are climbing, and the only freedom you have is after the rent is paid. So we can say all these things about eat healthy, whatever, make healthy choices, but at the end of the day, if people don't have much money left after rent, you can't make those choices. They don't become choices anymore. And while it sounds like a really good idea to take GST off healthy foods, or whatever you want to call it, it becomes an incredibly bureaucratic process to decide what food is healthy and what's not. And to that as well, the average house, they might spend, a household of 2 parents and 2 children might spend $100 or $200 a week on food. How much of that is going to be classified as healthy food? Well, not all of that $200. And so you'd actually have to spend quite a significant amount of money at the supermarket to actually get that money back as GST from your food. And even then, this 15% discount that we're thinking, well, actually that would be eaten up by the retailer, the wholesaler, so you're actually not going to get 15% back. So what we should be doing is actually looking how can we get rents down and incomes up, and that's what we would do with the Opportunities Party land value tax, to stabilise the housing market, give more income back to families. And actually what we want to see in the future in our long-term vision, because we have a long-term vision for universal basic income, because we recognise that 20% of New Zealand's GDP comes from unpaid labour. So that's childcare, that's care for the elderly, that's volunteering for things like the Child Poverty Action Group. And we need to recognise that, because we've lost that sense of community, because people aren't doing things for each other like we used to, because we're so damn busy working to pay the rent.
We all know that children need more good food on the table. Currently, there are 19 regulations that actually stop farmers from growing good kai. They need to be, got rid of, which is what the party will do, so that we can actually enable better agriculture to grow our food, to reduce the costs for our families, so that they pay less at the checkout, because currently our food is increased by 22%. So to get rid of those regulations that actually stop us from growing our good food, that is the first step to ensuring that our children actually have good food on the table and less costs in our pocket. Kia ora.
when we came into government, actually in this term of government, when COVID hit, the real deep throes of COVID, 20% of families with children were reporting that there was either no food or not enough food on the tables often. And by the time we got to this year's child poverty data, that number had reduced to 13%. And that comes from our government's investment into things like the food security program and really implementing the child and youth wellbeing strategy and making sure that there was support. And it's not just one single point of access of support, but it's making sure that the mums got what they needed and making sure that the children had the support, supporting groups like Plunkett, making sure that they could come into households and support the young mothers. But also then it's looking after the whole entire family as well, and some of the older siblings being able to go to school and have a healthy lunch, making sure they get access to period products as well. So it's support for the whole entire whanau, and that the fact that they get to live in a warm, dry home as well. So I do agree with that. We're talking about supermarkets. One of the incredible, achievements I will always look back on this term is the fact that we passed the grocery sector competition bill. We know that our supermarkets are making upwards of $1 million a day in profits. And so when we look back at the arguments of supermarkets, we know that competition needs to be brought in. And so making sure that we now have a grocery sector commissioner, when they look at the competition in our food sector, is extremely important. It means that players like Costco, the warehouse group, can get in there and actually really lower the price of Kai in our country, and making sure that every single family gets a good deal at the checkout, as well as the social support that MSD brings in, as well as working with all of our community sector to be providing that support to those who need it the most.
This is another example of a yes and, because the right to Kai actually, in my view, extends throughout your lifetime. And for too long, we've relied on the provision of things like food banks and growing the food bank sector in order to provide food security for families. But the food bank industry is a symptom of a wider problem, which is inadequate incomes, a high cost of living, and as a country not having a national food strategy, which is something the Greens have been calling for a very long time now, as part of the reforms that we should be doing on things like the supermarket industry. And this needs to include even looking at where we're building land. In Tamaki Makaurau, we are building houses, and we're building in Tamaki Makaurau houses and infrastructure in areas that are fertile, that should be actually used as part of initiatives for urban food gardens, where we can invest in mahinga kai. And so we do need a strategy to ensure that we have food resilience and sovereignty. And yes, we also need interventions to lower the cost of living, things like rent controls, a tax-free threshold, but we do need to build that as part of a broader food strategy in our country. We've been really strong on the issue of needing to also support low-income families to ensure that if their basic income cannot meet their cost, the cost of things like food, but they can access support at work and income. So we want to lift the cap to access food grants so that people don't have to show the receipts, so that people are trusted with their needs, to actually lessen that administrative and often dehumanizing burden that families are placed with. So having food resilience across all systems will require a national food strategy, and this is something that organizations on the ground are calling for, and something the Greens will be prioritizing in the next government.